Today on TOKKANTE, we're looking at Grand Seiko and why it seems like quite a number of collectors, sometimes even seasoned collectors, don't seem to quite connect with Grand Seiko. So why is that? Is it because of them or is it Grand Seiko? Well, I'll tell you the top 4 reasons why I think this one is on Grand Seiko. Hi everyone and welcome, I'm Ben. So in this type of video, we're gonna do things a little differently. This is not meant to be a guide or a fact-based kind of video, but more hopefully the start of a discussion between you and me, and hopefully you react to this in the comments. I'll tell you my opinion and my thinking behind why I think Grand Seiko is the reason why people can connect with them. But you tell me what you think. So the first reason, and it's not in order of importance or anything, the first reason I think is the history of Grand Seiko. Seiko Corporation established Grand Seiko and King Seiko for that matter in 1960 in order to compete with the Swiss chronometric standard of watchmaking. You can go and read all about that, but that's the topic of another video. The point is that they became very good at it and they rapidly started to win awards. But at the same time, both the Swiss watch industry and Seiko were actually working to develop the quartz movement. And in 1969, Seiko launched the Seiko Astron, which was the first commercially available quartz watch. And that created a problem for Seiko and for the watch world as a whole. It started the quartz crisis. And Seiko started to become known for cheap quartz watches, namely the Seiko 5. Eventually, in 1975, as Seiko was so popular, they were the victim of their own success and they discontinued the Grand Seiko brand. And it was not until 1998 that Grand Seiko was re-established in Japan and they launched the Grand Seiko 9S5. But that was only available in Japan and it was only launched internationally in 2010. So this kind of mislaunch of the brand might be a reason why people can't seem to connect with it. I think that in a way Seiko is seen as the enemy of the Swiss watchmaking world because they almost destroyed it. At the time, the Swiss watch industry almost collapsed because of the quartz movement launched by Seiko. Also because I think the Grand Seiko name was not really accepted as a luxury brand. And so I think that did not play in its favor. And still today, even if people don't really want to admit it, when they see Grand Seiko, they don't really accept it within the small world of luxury. So the second reason, which I think is related to the first one, is the name on the dial. Grand Seiko used to have Seiko written on their dial, and the Grand Seiko name was above the 6 o'clock position, but both names were on it. And it's only in 2017 that Seiko Corporation decided to establish Grand Seiko as an independent brand. And I think that did not help, and this is also why some people can feel a connection with it. Because they see Seiko Corporation as a huge faceless corporation that makes everything from cheap quartz watches, but also camera peripherals and optical lenses and printers and ink through their Epson subsidiary, and apparently other things like interior design and a lot of other things that are unrelated to luxury watches. And for some people that's a problem. Also, the number of employees in the Seiko Corporation is about 12,000. It's a big machine. If you compare that to Rolex, Rolex apparently only has about 4,000 employees. Patek Philippe only has 1,200. Omega has about 1,000. So some collectors see Grand Seiko just as a subdivision of a big, well-oiled machine that is the Seiko Corporation. And even though Grand Seiko is made separately in a small atelier in the Alps of Japan, they still see it just as a subdivision of a big multinational. So the third reason, which I think flows from the second one, is the marketing. Grand Seiko, up until recently, had terrible marketing. They focused on the product, but not on the marketing campaign or on brand ambassadors. So of course, collectors who are in the know, the connoisseur, they understand Grand Seiko, and Grand Seiko with them has kind of a cult status. And then it's through word of mouth and forums, and this is how the status of Grand Seiko spread. But with the general public, Grand Seiko basically did a terrible job at communicating. Even if you go to Grand Seiko website today, You go look at a product page and there's only one photo there, and up until recently you could not even click on it. I just checked yesterday, you can now click on it and zoom, but that's all you have. You have very minimum information, and that's all you get. Japanese websites in general are kind of outdated, and they really don't follow the international standards of brand marketing. And this is something that Seiko and Grand Seiko in particular seem to not have realized up until recently. So this is kind of changing since 2018. Grand Seiko is making a big push to connect with the international audience, but that's something that really they need to understand, that sometimes the marketing is just as important as the product itself. And finally, the fourth reason, going back to the product itself, why I think people can't connect sometimes, and it might be the biggest one, is the movements. Well, so what is Grand Seiko known for? Well, for me at least, number one is the dials. They have the best dial in the industry. No rival there. Second is the Zaratsu polish. The way they polish cases is like a black polish that other brands, even high-end brands, will use only on small parts, maybe on screws. Grand Seiko is using that on the entire case, and there's no equivalent. The third one is movements. So they're known for high-end quartz, spring drive obviously, and then high bit mechanical movements. But therein lies the problem. A lot of people, a lot of collectors still cannot accept a luxury brand with such a strong focus on high-end quartz and spring drive. Spring drive, if you want to read about it, you can Google that. I'm nowhere near qualified to explain to you how the spring drive works, but it's a hybrid basically between a quartz and automatic movement, and it might be the biggest invention in watchmaking for the last 30 years. But people still can't connect with that. Federico from Federico Talks Watches mentioned that it just could not connect with that spring drive, and that if he tried another Grand Seiko, it might be an automatic one. People feel that Grand Seiko watches have no heart or no soul because of the quartz or spring drive movement in them. Which is funny, because if you go on the Grand Seiko website, there's a whole section where they talk about takumi, which is this Japanese concept about how Grand Seiko artisans put their heart and soul, and that's the way they work in Japan to create those watches. But this is in exact opposite of why people actually seem to not be able to connect with Grand Seiko watches, because they feel like a quartz or spring drive movement, those watches don't have a heart, they don't have a soul. So this takumi concept is something that's sometimes difficult to connect for Westerners. It's a Japanese concept and value that is also very Japanese. There's also the issue of finishing. Dial finishing and case finishing with Zaratsu polish is second to none for Grand Seiko. However, if you look at bracelets and movement, they are not on the same level. And the movement, if you look at spring drive, unless you look at the Credor movement, but those are on another level. But if you look at the the regular standard Grand Seiko, they're not as well finished as the dial. So that was also an issue with collectors. So recently, Grand Seiko has launched new movement, and they're putting a huge emphasis on their movement once again. And with the 9S A5, the new high bit automatic, which is very, very promising because it's very well finished and it looks much better than before. So in conclusion, Grand Seiko, highly respected brand. They make amazing products and I love it. I personally am thinking of adding a Skyflake into my collection. Love the dial, love that it's a spring drive, and nothing wrong with Grand Seiko. But if we think about why people can't seem to connect with it, I think, part is history, part is the name on the dial, the marketing, and then the movement. I think Grand Seiko has started to understand that it's not all about the product, but it's a mix of product and communication. Grand Seiko is making a lot of improvement, is one of the fastest growing brands since they have really kind of relaunched with the international community in 2018. And I think, they deserve a closer look. So in the end, what do you think? Watch collecting is a very emotional hobby. So, can you connect with Grand Seiko? Do you agree? Do you not agree? Let me know what you think in the comment below. And if you find any value in this type of content, we'll do it again. Please like the video and consider to subscribe and hit the bell button so you can get notified of other videos coming out soon. Remember to always ask yourself what makes you tick. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.